Alex here on the video, or with the legal nuts and bolts video on the fragility of law. I get questions all the time from people, and I don't want to categorize these as policy questions. They're more so, what's your opinion questions. And I've mentioned earlier on in the series that I started to understand people want to know my opinion, so I should do more videos on it, even if I don't think it matters that much. But this video on the fragility of law, I almost decided not to do because I kind of felt like I covered most of these issues in the video opt-out culture. If you haven't seen the video opt-out culture, you should take a look at it because I talk about how most of society has this mentality, and I don't think that people realize it. I think it's more subconscious than anything. But this opt-out mentality that the court system and the government is scary, so let's interact with it as little as we possibly can. And that's in the sense of just avoiding any kind of anything to do with any government agency except the ones that people are generally forced to, like the DMV to get their driver's license and their ID and I don't know, pay their taxes. So the IRS. People don't think, oh, I'm going to go find a way to interact with the government today. It's one of those things that is the most reluctant thing anyone wants to do. And so I kind of figured that these things that get brought up to my attention are mostly in that, in the category of that video. But really, that video is just kind of a foundation for some other realizations and epiphanies that I've had along the lines of the things people have talked to me about. And I'm going to go ahead and start mentioning those things now. I don't intend to be vague. There's like two or three different things people talk about, and mainly it has to do with, martial law and the vaccine stuff that's going on, and the Constitution, things like that, which I'm not going to really tackle head on from a policy point, but I am going to talk about from the perspective of sort of a lack of understanding and a lack of knowledge. And I think at the end of this video, I'm going to talk about what I call the trust factor. I'm going to ignore that for the majority of this video. I'm going to leave it out. And then at the very end, I'll talk about the trust factor and how it kind of fills in a lot of the gaps. But the thing, this sort of concept or idea is that people don't really have that much respect for the law in this country, and that it's sort of at risk of being just completely thrown away and discarded at any moment. And in the general sense, I hate to say it, but I kind of agree. And the thing is that as human beings, we try to relate to things, and it's hard to relate to something that you never interact with and that you don't understand. And so the concern that people have about their rights being eroded is a valid concern. I just think that this idea that people should just automatically care is a nonsense idea. You can't expect people to just care because they were told to. You have to care because I said so, or you're a bad person. That doesn't work. People care about things all the time. It's just that they understand them or they interact with them on, a daily basis. For example, people understand freedom of speech and the First Amendment because people like the idea of being able to say what they want. Nobody thinks it's a good idea to live in a country where you can't give your opinion or you're going to go to prison. Same thing with like the Second Amendment. It's another one of those emotional things. People understand that they want to have guns, and they use them. They go out and shoot, or they hunt, or they go shoot for fun, or they have it for self-defense. And so, magically, I'm going to use that word. It's kind of, I guess you could say, as sarcastically, magically, people care about certain parts of the law and not others. And as I said earlier in the video, people care about what they understand about and what they can relate to, or what they, deal with on a daily basis. That's why I think prohibition failed, is not because people got into the legal principles of prohibition or domestic policy of the nation. People just like drinking, and they just disagreed with the law. So they understood drinking, they didn't understand the law, and what does that mean? They just decided to get around it. And the same thing now, even way more recently, is marijuana. All these states are, Nevada included, opening the door for marijuana, and it's one of those issues. Why did that happen? Did people do public policy analysis at the dinner table? No, they just were like, I like smoking weed, and there was thousands and thousands of them. And so they understood that and they wanted that and they kind of forced it to occur. So what I'm getting at here is it's really kind of scary, kind of a scary realization that, yeah, the law is really fragile, not just in this country, but in any country. And the reason why is because it's sort of, as a system, alienated most of the population from it. Probably 99% of the, maybe 98% of the population has been totally alienated from the legal system. And it doesn't help that there's this sort of elitist attitude from the attorneys and the judiciary that you have to have an attorney to go through the process. And I don't think that they're doing that on purpose. I don't think that they wake up and say, I love being part of an elite group and everyone should have to pay us a ton of money, or else. I just think that they are stuck in the reality of the situation, which is that number one, it's extraordinarily and unnecessarily complicated. I will emphasize that it is unnecessarily complicated. In engineering, we have a concept of necessary complexity. And so we embrace that where that's the case. But unnecessary complexity is, there's no place for that anywhere in the world. And the other problem is the culture, the insular culture of the legal community, which in many ways is sort of irrationally opposed to any kind of outside interaction with their field. And I come to the conclusion where the system itself is so vulnerable because the system itself has created the situation. The attorneys and the judiciary are perfectly capable of making the system easier for ordinary people to understand, and especially for engaging with the public, which is something that they are so bad at. They do not understand the importance of engaging with the public, and they create a situation where it could conceivably happen that the law is discarded. There's been, I mean, situations in other countries where it happens. This country itself rejected British rule, and even looking recently at the that group that broke into, I don't remember where it was, in Washington D.C. I guess it was like the House or something. They broke into that room and it totally freaked everyone out. Like, what the heck was that? Was that a coup in America? Like, these things are totally possible, and it's too bad that the system itself doesn't realize its own peril, that if something doesn't change, they are at risk of becoming irrelevant. Just, and it's not a sort of, I don't think from the perspective of revenge. I just think it's that the public gives so little value to the work that they do, so little value. It's, I guess in a sense, it's something that our Nevada judges is trying to deal with by explaining the process to the viewers and educating the viewers on the details. And in a sense, even the proper person. Of course, my perspective is child custody and visitation, but I was one of those people when I first started the legal process. I thought it didn't make any sense and it was pointless. And that it just seemed to me to be a place where attorneys could abuse good parents and facilitate the abuse of a child. I've said that numerous times in my docket series, that both the judge and the attorney facilitated child abuse, and I stand by my statements. But then when I got to the end of it, when I got through the Supreme Court appeals, when the Supreme Court started to correct the mistakes that the family court judges were making, when the Supreme Court published Falcone v. Secretary of State, I started to see value in the system. Still unnecessarily complex, but there is a value to the work that they do. There is a point to the process. I came to the really ugly reality in the video. I think it's titled Control, but now maybe it's titled Force. Check for both videos, Force or Control. It's one of the two, one or the other. It's a really ugly conclusion that I came to, but some people have to be forced to do things. And the legal system is there to make sure that people are forced to do things when it is appropriate and correct for them to be forced to do things. There's a point to the process, but it took me 8 years to figure that out. And it took me a tremendous amount of research, experiences, and knowledge. And what it tells me now is that if the government, and more so the legal community and the judiciary, wants the support of the public, which it used to have, and they talk about that in the case Awad v. Wright, which is a 2019, no, sorry, it's a 19 case, 1919, 1918, maybe 1913. These numbers are floating around in my head, but it's way back in the early 1900s, where in Awad v. Wright, the Supreme Court acknowledged the respect and trust that the public gave to the judiciary, which it doesn't anymore. In fact, there was a State of the Judiciary address from Chief Justice James Hardesty in Nevada, where he said that the judiciary can no longer expect to just have the blind support of the public, and specifically that they needed to start figuring out how to engage with the public. I published that video on Art of Edit Judges if you want to watch it, but these are the realities of the situation. And I guess that these sort of thoughts that I've had over the last few days and the decision that I ultimately made to create this video really underlines my belief that that it could happen in this country, where people just say that the law is pointless, all it does is rip us all off, or it's only there for the rich, and that there could be some kind of major, upheaval of the legal system. And I think that that would be a tragedy, because the law is complicated when a country gets complicated. And this country has gotten humongous. It's got military forces all over the world. It has all sorts of different complicated complicated industries that work together, including the financial sector, the military industrial sector, media outlets. It's such a big, complicated country, and lawsuits become complicated when countries and business entities and corporations come about, and you have complicated things like the stock markets and hedge funds and all these things. And for a long time, I think that people accepted all of these complicated things because of trust. And I was going to talk about the trust factor, so I guess now I'll talk about it. A lot of people would say, Alex, everything you've said is true, but a lot of people still trust the government and they're fine with it. And that's because of the trust factor. When there is a lack of understanding and when there is a lack of engagement, the trust factor sort of comes in to fill those gaps, and the support of the public will just be there. Even though they don't understand things, they'll just trust them. And that's because of maybe their life is going well, they have a great job, they're raising their family, everything's going fine, so the government must be doing something right, and so they just trust the government. And that's something that I wanted to talk about, and I didn't want to marginalize this idea of people who just blindly trust the government. If you don't understand a concept, all you can do is blindly trust it. If you understood it, it wouldn't be blind trust. And that's just a part of reality, and it's a part of, more specifically, the reality of the problem of time. People don't have all the time in the world to research everything. And trust is a huge part of any human being's life. You just only have 24 hours in a day, and you use presumably 8 of those hours to sleep. And so you don't have all the time in the world to do all this research and learn everything that's going on. And you have to work, and you have to connect with your friends and go out and sort of stay sane. And it only leaves a little bit of time for research. And people want to trust because that's the reality of the constraint of time. If everybody could just like plug in a USB cable into their arm and just download all the information in the world, then maybe this wouldn't be an issue, but people can't. And so they trust certain organizations or entities to give them the information that they need to understand whether or not things are going well or not. And people react when these organizations, whether it's media or even something like a internet research website, whatever, when these systems say there's something going on, the people just trust that that's actually a problem. Well, when the trust starts to get sort of eroded, that goes away and things start to get weird. And I think that's what came out in the 2020 election cycle with the allegations of voter fraud and stuff like that. Is there was not just a reflection of claims that were being made that were alarming, but it was a reflection of the public's lack of trust for the government. And so when there's no trust, or when there's less trust than usual, you start to see more anxiety on a large scale, and alarming things occur, like what occurred with the people who stormed into I guess, I still don't know what it was, guys. Correct me if you want in the comments, whether it was the Senate or Assembly, or I know that that's where where legislators go and vote. I know that's what the building was. Forgive me for not doing a lot of research on that, but that wasn't really the primary point of the video. I just am using it right now to point out that when trust gets low and people don't understand what's going on, really alarming things start to occur in a society. So I guess this is kind of my video acknowledging the concerns that some of my viewers have when they talk to me about martial law and the suspension of the Constitution and things like that. And another area that people are really emotionally connected to is religion. And look at that. That's another area of the law that's really well protected because tons and tons of people care about it. So, I guess to sort of end this video, I just wanted to say that yeah, it's a real problem, and the only way to solve it is for more people to learn about how it works, which is something that hopefully more YouTube channels will focus on, and also for people to engage, and hopefully more attorneys and judges realize the importance of learning to engage with the public and um, sort of reconnecting there, and ultimately in the long term, maybe finding a way for ordinary people to be able to engage with the judiciary without being totally terrified or without losing their life savings hiring an attorney. Hopefully, society and the legal community, which right now are so far apart, learn how to come together and make something like this happen. And that's something that would probably scare a lot of attorneys and judges, especially attorneys, because it would undermine their business model, which that's not something that anyone's going to be happy with. But the problem is that their business model impacts people's rights. And the idea that you don't have any rights unless you're rich is an idea that nobody in this country is going to accept. People just don't like that. And okay, I'm going to end this with one more, sort of observation. If you look at universal healthcare, if prior to that coming into being, people were able to get insurance for really low prices and get their health care using the existing system, would an idea like that have ever come about? No. People would have been like, I'm able to get insurance for $50 a month and I get great care and everything's fine. And so, no, we're not going to change anything. Things like that happen, where universal healthcare comes about when millions and millions of people feel completely and totally alienated from an entire industry. And it's the idea that you only get healthcare if you're rich starts to be an idea that tons and tons of people accept. And just like that, an entire industry is, there's upheaval. And so that could happen anywhere in any sector where there is too weak of a connection from the masses in that particular industry, and the masses becomes alienated from it, or they feel like they don't matter, or that only rich people have access to it. It upsets people, and you get these radical changes. And I'm not going to say if anything, any of the topics that I've talked about in this video, I don't have an opinion. At least not a public opinion in one direction or the other. That's not the point of this channel. But it is sort of one of those things that shows you what can happen when um, that particular industry ran all kinds of political campaigns in the news, and they had an entire political party backing resistance to universal health care, and it didn't matter in the end because they didn't find a way to make it work on their own. And so since they didn't find a way to make it work on their own, the public and the other party decided, screw you, we're going to force this to occur using legislation. And that could happen in any other area too, including the law. They can run all of these campaigns to try and get people to care and tell them, you're supposed to care, it's your rights, it's the law, blah, blah, blah. Kind of like I talked about in that video. Oh, I did it recently. I wish I could remember now. A Nation of Laws, really good video that I did, where the media was like almost scolding the public, shame on you, this is a nation of laws, and it's this idea that you have to kind of tell people what to think. And I don't think it works. I think people just will say, screw you, it doesn't work. And so we don't want it anymore. Or it only works for 1% of the people or 2%. So I hope that this video is useful. I'm always very cautious when I do videos like this, but lately I've been getting a lot of positive reactions. So mention down in the comments below what you think, what your thoughts are on this topic. And of course, if you have any questions, you can go ahead and mention those in the comments below as well. All that being said, I will see you guys next time.